Every afternoon, when she arrived home from school, Melody would dash to her bedroom window. From there, she could peer into the yard next door where an old willow tree cast sweeping shadows across the lawn. For as many days as Melody could remember, the place had looked sadly neglected. The lawn was unkempt, full of overgrown weeds and fallen leaves. A rusted watering can lay toppled on its side. A single wooden bench, streaked with faded white paint, sat waiting for someone who never came. She often spotted an elderly man there, tall and thin, moving slowly. He wore a wide-brimmed straw hat that had seen better days and carried himself in a way that suggested he'd once been energetic and strong. Melody was intrigued by this man whose name she didn't know. He appeared lonely, standing in the yard, gazing at the broken fence or staring down the empty walkway. In her mind, she called him Mr. Straw Hat. Melody's mother had occasionally mentioned him in passing. "He's lived there for a very long time," she would say. "Hardly anyone visits." Yet, Melody continued to watch him from a distance as she tried to solve the puzzle of his sorrow. Every so often, she caught a glimpse of something that looked like longing in his posture, as if he were remembering better days gone by. One bright spring afternoon, Melody's curiosity finally overcame her. She decided to step over to the next yard instead of simply watching from her window. Peering over the fence, she called out, "Hello, sir." Her voice was timid at first, uncertain how he might react. "I live next door. My name is Melody." At first, the man didn't seem to hear her. He was kneeling by the trunk of the willow tree, brushing away dry leaves from its roots. Then he looked up, startled. His deep-set eyes, gray like weathered stone, regarded her a moment. "Why, hello there," he said. His voice was low and a bit scratchy, but warm enough to invite conversation. "I didn't realize anyone was watching me." "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to startle you," Melody responded quickly, climbing up on the fence's crossbeam so she could rest her elbows on top. "I've seen you from my window. I was just curious." She felt small beneath his gaze, but something in his expression told her not to be frightened. "No need to apologize." The man straightened his back, and a glimmer of what could have been a half-smile crossed his face. "My name's Walter Hollis. How do you do, Melody?" "I'm fine, thank you," she answered, her words coming out in a friendly rush. Then, as boldly as she could manage, she added, "What are you doing?" Walter exhaled deeply, his gaze sweeping over the neglected yard. "Trying to tidy up a little." His voice softened. "This place needs it." With that understated remark, Melody discovered she felt unexpectedly comfortable talking to him. There was a soft sadness in the man that made her want to cheer him up. She thought of all the things he might like to do: plant new flowers, paint the bench, perhaps hang a bird feeder. But before she could say more, Walter gave a nod. "I should be getting inside. I have some soup cooking." "Okay," Melody replied. "It was nice meeting you." He lifted a hand in a polite wave. Then, with careful steps, he went inside, leaving Melody with questions swirling in her mind. She stared at the yard for several minutes, wondering how a place that once might have been beautiful had fallen into disrepair. She caught sight of an old garden sculpture, a small angel with chipped wings, sitting half buried in the overgrowth. There was something about it all that tugged at her heart. Over the next few days, Melody found herself unable to stop thinking about Walter's neglected yard. The more she looked, the more she spotted subtle hints that it had once been a thriving garden. A rotted trellis stood by the fence, entangled with the dried remains of vines that must have once blossomed. A rusted archway, presumably for climbing roses, formed a half-circle near the back gate. Melody understood that somewhere under all the tangles, dead leaves, and weeds, a garden waited to be revived. That weekend, Melody woke up to brilliant sunlight streaming through her curtains. She felt an excitement in her chest that she couldn't quite explain, an urge to venture outside and do something meaningful. She knocked on her parents' bedroom door, announcing she was going for a short walk next door. Her mother, who was making breakfast, gave a nod of approval. "Just be careful," she told her, though Melody sensed in her mother a bit of relief. Her daughter reaching out to the lonely neighbor felt right somehow. Melody took slow, deliberate steps across the boundary between her yard and Walter's. the early spring grass tickling her ankles. In one hand, she carried a small spade from her mother's gardening kit. She wasn't entirely sure what to do, but she figured it might be helpful to bring something useful. Walter stood out front, clutching the handle of a watering can as though pondering whether to fill it. The lines on his face appeared deeper that morning, shadows cast from the sun highlighting his weary posture. "Mr. Hollis!" she called. "Do you need any help?" He turned, first with surprise and then with cautious interest. "Melody, good morning. You're up early on a Saturday." "It's too nice a day to stay inside," she said, summoning all the bright optimism she could muster. "I thought maybe I could help you with your yard." She gestured with the small spade. "If you want." He paused, the watering can dangling from his fingers. "Why would you want to do that? I don't have much to offer." "I just like gardening," Melody shrugged, though the truth was that her experience was mostly limited to watering her mother's herbs. "And you look like you could use another hand." Walter's gaze landed on the spade, then flickered around his neglected yard. Finally, he gave a single nod, a movement so slight that Melody almost missed it. "All right," he said quietly. They began by clearing the dry, brittle weeds from the area around the willow tree. Sitting on their knees in the grass, they pulled away clumps of tangled roots and set them aside for compost. Melody was surprised at how effortlessly they worked together. Though Walter was not fast, his grip was gentle yet certain, and she soon discovered his knowledge of plants far surpassed her own. "These were once bluebells," Walter said, pointing to a few slender, pale stalks found in the matted clumps. "My wife adored them. She planted them over there under the willow, so they'd catch dappled sunlight. Now they're pretty much gone." His voice lowered, as if drifting off into a memory. Melody studied his expression. "Maybe we can plant new ones," she suggested softly. A faint warmth stirred in Walter's eyes. "Yes," he responded. "That would be nice." They spent several hours working slowly, and Melody hardly noticed how time passed. The day rang with the music of songbirds, and sunlight danced through the willow's trailing branches. By late morning, she felt a pleasant tiredness in her limbs. Walter invited her inside for a cold drink. She followed him into a living room that bore signs of a life once shared with someone else: a quaint floral tablecloth on the small dining table, a china cabinet full of delicate plates and cups, shelves lined with books about landscaping and nature. Melody noticed a single photograph on the mantel, a younger Walter, beaming, with a woman who looked so full of joy. She had wavy hair, and her hand clutched a small bouquet of wildflowers. "Is that your wife?" Melody asked, glancing at the photo. Walter hesitated, then nodded. "Her name was Dorothy," he replied quietly. He reached for the picture, pressing his thin lips together as the memory flickered in his gaze. "She left me 3 years ago. Cancer." The weight in his voice made Melody's heart clench. She wasn't sure what to say, so she simply offered a sympathetic look. "She loved this garden," Walter continued, carefully setting the photo back in place. "It was all hers, you see. I merely helped dig and prune while she chose the colors and the flowers." A weak chuckle escaped him. "After she was gone, he trailed off, shaking his head. I didn't have the strength to take care of it." Melody lightly touched his arm. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I wish I could have met her. But maybe we can fix it. Bring it back to life for her." His eyes were misty as he let his hand rest on hers. "Thank you, Melody." In that moment, an unspoken bond formed between them. It spanned the years that lay between childhood and old age, linked by the simple desire to heal something broken. The following weekend, Melody came by again, this time with a small bag of seeds her mother had purchased: sunflowers, petunias, and marigolds. She also brought new gloves and an extra trowel. The morning breezes carried the scent of fresh earth, and once again the two of them began working side by side. Walter showed her how to rake through the soil carefully, removing stones and old roots. He taught her how to space the seeds so they'd have room to grow, then how deep to bury them. "Marigolds keep pests away," he explained, sprinkling bright orange seeds in a neat row. His voice held a touch of pride. "They act like a shield for more delicate flowers." Melody sipped in every piece of knowledge. She found herself seeking his approval, determined to avoid the clumsy mistakes a beginner might make. She was careful, placing the seeds in small holes, covering them with a blanket of soft earth, and patting them gently. Walter, for his part, seemed heartened by her enthusiasm. Although he still moved conservatively, as though each action required mindful effort, his posture straightened each time Melody asked questions or exclaimed with excitement over a budding plant. That afternoon, Melody's mother, curious about her daughter's enthusiastic new hobby, came by for a visit. She brought lemonade and sandwiches for them all. Walter, initially shy, welcomed her kindly. Melody could see the tension in his frame melt a little as her mother offered words of encouragement. Before leaving, her mother placed a hand on Walter's shoulder. "It's so lovely to see you outside again," she said. "I still remember Dorothy and how happy she was out here." A flicker of sorrow passed through Walter's eyes, followed by gratitude. "Thank you," he managed. After she left, he said nothing, but Melody sensed his heart had been moved by her mother's gentle reminder. As the days turned to weeks, Melody and Walter developed a rhythm. She would appear on sunny afternoons and a few times on weekends. Together, they would prune away dead branches, rake up leaves, and carefully place new seedlings in freshly turned soil. Walter began to pull out old planting diagrams from his garage, showing Melody how Dorothy had once planned the garden to burst with color in every season. Here would be begonias, there hydrangeas, and over there tall sunflowers that would attract bees. The more he shared, the more Melody realized Dorothy must have been a wonderful woman, overflowing with creative vision. Slowly, patches of green returned to the yard. Tiny leaves unfurled, and the air began to fill with the faint perfume of budding flowers. The battered old watering can found renewed purpose, traveling up and down the rows of newly tilled soil. Melody took her role seriously, ensuring each fragile seedling received enough water and sunlight. She learned when to water in the morning and how to shield delicate seedlings from scorching midday heat. Sometimes, as they worked, Walter would drift into stories of his youth. He told Melody about growing up on a farm, how he met Dorothy in the town library, and the way she convinced him to plant flowers instead of just vegetables. Melody listened raptly, feeling as though she were entering a secret world brimming with memories of love, hope, and dreams. In return, Melody shared bits of her life, her favorite subjects in school, the fact that she still felt shy in class, how she and her best friend once tried to bake cookies but ended up with rock-hard lumps. Walter chuckled at her tales, occasionally offering wise advice. "Baking is just like gardening," he said. "It's all about balancing the right ingredients and giving them time to come together." One day, as they cleared a corner of the yard choked with tangled vines, Melody uncovered something that made her gasp: a stone pathway. Beneath the dirt and debris lay flat pieces of weathered slate, forming a winding route through what must have once been a hidden section of the garden. Walter's eyes lit up with recognition and wonder. "That leads to the rose trellis," he recalled. "Dorothy's favorite place." Excitement bubbled up in Melody. She brushed away the leaves, revealing more stones, then turned questioningly to Walter. "Should we keep going?" He paused, looking uncertain for a moment. The sadness in his expression returned as he remembered how Dorothy used to stand there, inhaling the sweet fragrance of her roses. But then he nodded. "Yes, let's see if we can uncover it." Together, they spent that afternoon carefully removing layers of weeds and layers of soil, gradually unveiling the hidden pathway. The rose trellis itself was in dire shape, rusty and bent in places, missing some of its ornate, curving pieces. Yet, lingering at its base, they found a few determined rose stems, stunted but still alive. "They're fighters," Walter murmured, almost in disbelief. Melody's heart raced with excitement. "This is going to be amazing once they bloom again," she said. Turning to Walter, she added, "We can fix the trellis. We can do it together." Walter pressed his lips together in a tired but resolute smile. "Yes," he agreed, "we'll bring them back." That evening, after she returned home, Melody felt an indescribable joy. She couldn't wait to tell her mother about the roses, about the hidden path, about the joy it brought to see Walter's eyes spark with hope. A faint sense emerged that she'd found a calling, no matter how small, to help someone heal through a garden that deserved another chance. Summer marched in with its blazing sun and long golden days. By then, Walter's yard showed remarkable improvement. Hardy marigolds lined the borders, their bright orange blooms swaying in the gentle breeze. Petunias, white and pink, overflowed from a newly repaired wooden planter. Even a handful of sunflowers planted by Melody, with hopeful enthusiasm, stretched skyward, though they were not yet ready to bloom. Walter replaced worn-out fence boards with Melody's help, painting them a cheerful pale green. One afternoon, as the heat reached a sweltering peak, Walter suggested they take a break under the willow tree. Melody helped him carry out 2 chairs and a small table, along with glasses of iced tea. Panting from the work, they settled into the shade, lulled by the cicadas singing in the grass. Walter took a long sip before turning to Melody. "Do you know," he began, "for many months, I didn't speak to anyone for more than a few minutes. I didn't feel like I had much to say." Melody looked up from swirling her tea with his spoon. "I'm glad you're talking to me," she said simply. His gaze swept over the yard. "You've helped me rediscover something I thought was lost. Dorothy's spirit is everywhere here. Before, that made me sad, but now," he gulped softly, "I'm learning to cherish it." A gentle happiness spread through Melody. "I think Dorothy would be proud of how hard you're working," she said. "I hope the flowers make you happy." "They do," he answered, his tone thick with emotion. "And they wouldn't be here without you, Melody." "Thank you." They lapsed into a peaceful silence, letting the moment speak for itself. In the hush of that afternoon, Melody sensed that the broken pieces of the past were slowly being mended by new buds of hope. In the weeks that followed, the garden continued to bloom. The newly planted roses sent out fresh shoots, and Walter, with Melody's encouragement, bought a jar of specialized rose fertilizer to give them a little push. The sunflowers reached impressive heights, crowns almost as tall as Walter. By midsummer, bright yellow petals unfurled, giving the yard a radiant sense of celebration. Melody adored them, and each morning she'd check from her window to see if new petals had opened during the night. Neighbors began to notice the transformation. While passing by, they stopped to compliment Walter on the vibrant blossoms. Some recalled glimpses of the garden during Dorothy's era. "It's so nice to see those flowers again," said one elderly couple who beamed as if the renewal of the garden belonged to the entire neighborhood. Melody's mother and father visited more often, bringing cookies or lemonade, sometimes sharing a few gardening tips of their own. Walter's once solemn face lit up during these visits. He had new stories to tell, a renewed sense of community breaking through his past isolation. One early evening, as the sky blushed with the soft pink of sunset, Melody lingered in the yard to water the freshly planted hydrangeas. Walter was inside, resting a painful knee, so she took it upon herself to close out the day's gardening. She listened to the swish of the hose, the droplets pattering gently against leaves. The golden sunlight danced among the roses, giving them a dreamy glow. Suddenly, she heard a faint rustling behind the trellis. Curious, she set down the hose and crept toward the sound. There, a small stray cat with brindled fur and wide green eyes peered at her from beneath a rose bush. It looked as though it was seeking shelter among the newly restored blossoms. Melody crouched low, cooing softly. "Hey there, little one, it's okay." She extended a hand carefully, heart swelling with compassion for this small creature. The cat sniffed the air, then cautiously inched forward. Melody noticed it was thin. Without thinking, she found herself calling toward the house. "Mr. Hollis!" "We've got a visitor." Walter came hobbling out, curiosity piqued. When he saw the cat, he gave a soft chuckle. "We used to have a neighborhood cat that wandered in here. Dorothy would feed it scraps of salmon when it showed up." After a moment's thought, he turned to Melody. "Why don't you get it a little food? We can spare some milk and leftover chicken." Thrilled, Melody sprang up, carefully weaving her way inside to locate Walter's kitchen. She took out a saucer, pouring a small pool of milk. Gathering scraps of chicken, she returned outside and set it within reach of the cat. The animal promptly bounded over, lapping and gobbling everything in sight. When it lifted its head again, milk dribbled from its chin. Walter shook his head with a wry grin. Looks like this cat has good taste. He said, we might just have a new companion in the garden. Melody checked her watch. It was past supper time, and she knew she couldn't stay much longer. We should name it, she offered. That's up to you, Walter smiled softly. How about Rosie? The cat was near the roses, after all. Walter looked at the bright petals and gave a nod. Rosie it is. In the twilight of that evening, Melody left Walter's yard with a warm glow in her heart. She had a feeling Rosie would stick around, drawn by the kindness and attention that now thrived there, replacing the loneliness that once pervaded the place. However, the next few days took a surprising turn. Melody caught a nasty summer cold and spent nearly a week indoors, her throat scratchy and her head aching. Unable to visit Walter, she worried that the new seedlings wouldn't get enough water or that the cat might not be fed. Her parents reassured her. Walter's been taking care of it all, don't worry. He's also left messages, sending you warm wishes and hoping you get well soon. At last, when her health improved, Melody hurried next door, anxious to see how things had held up. She found Walter near the rose trellis, wearing his straw hat, but with a sprightly air quite unlike his former self. The roses had opened into a spectacular array of blooms, pink, red, and even a pale yellow variety. Rosie lazed in the sun at Walter's feet, purring contentedly. Before Melody could say a word, Walter turned, face bright with excitement. I've been waiting to show you, he said. He extended a hand, leading her toward a newly erected archway. The old, rusted one was gone, replaced by a refurbished structure that Walter had either purchased or painstakingly built. Melody's eyes widened in wonder. Roses climbed the arch, weaving through the trellis in a burst of color. It was glorious, as though Dorothy's favorite place had been reborn. Mr. Hollis, she breathed, it's beautiful. He smiled at her, and though the marks of sorrow still lingered in the lines on his face, the joy beaming out was undeniable. I signed up for a rose gardening workshop at the local nursery. I even met a few folks there who remembered Dorothy. They helped me pick out new trellis parts and offered advice. Melody felt tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them away, too happy to let watery visions spoil the moment. I'm so proud of you, she said. Walter cleared his throat, revealing that her words had moved him deeply. I'm proud of the both of us, Melody, he replied. We did this together. From that day forward, the garden took on a life of its own, flourishing in ways that left neighbors in awe. Bees buzzed around the sunflower heads, and bright butterflies floated from one bloom to another. The lawn, once choked with weeds, now resembled a soft emerald carpet. The bench under the willow tree glistened with a fresh coat of white paint. Rosie sauntered wherever she pleased, queen of the blossoming realm, and in the evenings Walter could be found gazing out at the garden, a mix of serenity and gentle longing on his face. They invited a few neighbors who had been curious about the transformation taking place on their street. Melody helped string up colorful bunting and set a folding table with refreshments, finger sandwiches, slices of fruit, lemonade, and iced tea. At first, Walter seemed apprehensive, but as the day approached, Melody saw more of that determined spark in his eyes. He wanted to share the garden's beauty with others. When guests arrived, the once lonely yard filled with murmurs of appreciation. People marveled at the bright blooms, the stone pathway, the charming archway, and the sense of calm given off by the peaceful willow overhead. Walter wore his straw hat proudly, guiding visitors around like a docent in a museum of living color. When someone commented on how Dorothy must be smiling down on him, he only nodded, eyes damp with gratitude. Throughout the event, Melody noticed the difference the garden had made, not just to Walter, but to the entire neighborhood. People who barely knew him now came to shake his hand. They reminisced about days gone by, shared tips on pruning or composting, and congratulated him on all the progress. Some offered cuttings from their own gardens to further expand his collection. Others promised to bring hummingbird feeders or bird baths. Seeing how the simple act of gardening had united so many warmed Melody's heart. As twilight fell on that small gathering, a handful of guests lingered on the lawn, the lanterns strung from tree branches giving the yard a soft glow. Melody sat with her parents on the white bench, while Walter stood a few paces away, speaking softly with another neighbor. Even Rosie scampered around the paths, graceful in the dim light. Eventually, Melody excused herself from her mom and dad to join Walter's side. They observed the guests who were talking and laughing like old friends. Walter took in a contented breath, exhaling with an air of peaceful acceptance. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" he said quietly. Melody nodded. "We really have." "I'm grateful for you, Mr. Hollis. I I learned so much here." Her voice quavered slightly with emotion she hadn't expected to feel. He turned to her, smiling fondly. "You did more for me than you'll ever know," he said. "For the longest time, I thought I was destined to watch this place fade, but you reminded me that there is still life, still warmth to be found." He surveyed the horizon, where pinks and purples streaked the sky. "Dorothy would be proud." With a mixture of sweetness and sorrow, Melody squeezed his hand. Both of them stood there under the shimmering branches of the willow tree, letting the hush of evening envelop them. Soon the gathering began to wind down, though traces of laughter still floated in the cooler air. Melody helped her mother tidy up plates, while Walter politely saw the last neighbors off. As the front gate latched shut, he returned to stand beneath the rose arch, inhaling the perfume of thriving blooms. The hush of the nearly empty garden was almost reverent, as though Dorothy's spirit lingered to offer a silent blessing. When Melody finished her tasks, she joined him. Now, with the guests gone, a gentle calm settled over the yard. The warm glow of lanterns draped the trellis and the leaves in a soft luminescence. It felt safe. It felt complete. Walter removed his straw hat, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Melody," he said, his voice thick with gratitude. "I want you to come by whenever you wish. This garden is yours as much as mine now." She glanced around, taking in the fruits of their shared labor. The newly painted bench, the blossoming roses, the vibrant flowers in neat rows, the impatient cat weaving around the base of the willow. Her eyes landed on Walter's face, which seemed lighter and more peaceful than she'd ever seen. "Thank you," she managed softly. "I'd love that." They stood in companionable silence, content in the knowledge that they had not just saved a garden, but forged a lasting bond. What began as a hesitant greeting over a fence had blossomed into a profound friendship. In nurturing the delicate petals and leafy vines, they had also planted hope in each other's hearts. Hope that transcended their differences in years and experience. When Melody finally prepared to head home, Walter accompanied her to the fence line. She slid through the gate, turning back one last time. Bathed in the gentle glow of the lanterns, Walter smiled. "Good night," he said softly. "Good night, Mr. Hollis," Melody replied. As she crossed into her yard, she felt a mix of contentment and a curious new awareness of how a single act of kindness could bridge an entire generation. That night, from her bedroom window, Melody gazed at the now stunning garden next door with a bright half-moon shining above. Her room felt cozy, lit by the softness of a small lamp, but her attention was fixed on the scene beyond. She no longer needed to wonder about the lonely figure of Mr. Straw Hat. Walter was no longer alone. The garden, once hidden beneath layers of neglect and sorrow, had bloomed with color and promise. And in that garden, a friendship had taken root, fragile yet resilient, capable of growing in the face of life's toughest storms. She drifted to sleep with a sense of peace. There, in the soft glow of moonlight, an old man found renewed purpose, a young girl discovered a calling, and the seeds they planted, both in the flower beds and in each other's hearts, flourished into something extraordinary.